What you hear is the Czech Radio Big Band musicians in concert with Aid Kid.
Welcome to Faces of Czech Music, Radio Prague International and Czech Center's podcast.
We want to remind you that 2024 is the year of Czech music.
Our podcast will try to show you that the Czech music is not only Dvořák, Smetana or indeed Janáček, but much more.
So let us introduce some new names and new faces from different genres to you.
Faces of Czech Music is presented by Amelia Mola-Schmidt
and Petr Dudek.
The new face today is Ondřej Mikula, or 8-Kid as he's known among his friends and fans. Musician, producer, composer, DJ and collaborator with the Czech Radio Orchestra.
Pleasure to have you in today. Thanks for coming by to talk with us. How are you feeling?
I'm fine.
Petr and I sat down to talk about the name and we're like, Aid Kid. We either went to First Aid Kit, the Swedish sister duo, or First Aid. So tell us a little bit about the name and what it means.
Well, it's a 10 years old name for the project because the project is 10 years old and it comes from the album Kid A from Radiohead, which is like my one of my favorite albums, but also the album that introduced me to some kind of like different music, and I think it very much shaped the way I perceive music and later maybe create.
And your friends actually call you 8-Kid, or do they call you Ondřej?
I would say both. I asked them to call me Ondřej or Ondra, of course. But some of the friends that knew 8-Kid first, then actually knew me, they sometimes just call me 8-Kid.
For the listeners who are not familiar with your work, you are a musician, a composer, producer, and DJ. And that's all in one, or four separate professions?
The lines between these professions are blurred, so I just use these 4 words because it sounds cool.
A true jack of all trades, I think. When someone goes to an Aid Kid show, what would they expect to see? How would you describe one of your performances?
A typical one, if there is a thing like that.
Well, a typical one is that it's just me with a table, with a bunch of stuff on the table that I use to play some sounds I did before, to change them, mangle them, or to create new sounds on the go. But recently I got joined by a very talented drummer, Jakub Švejnar. From now on I will be performing in 2 people because I was lonely on the stage. It's better in late hours, and then I get to dance a bit too. I mean, if the audience is dancing, it gives me some energy as well. But if the audience is more listening, then it's very much static. But that's what stage designers and light designers are for, because electronic music and DJing and stuff, you don't have the excitement of a live band. You can't see like people doing every part of the music, so the band is joined by these like visual professions.
Do you find that the visual elements of your shows are equally as important as the musical element?
Again, depends on the show. If the show is called audiovisual, then it's equal. The visuals and the music. I used to work with like a motion graphic designer, Pavel Karafiat, a lot. And the same way my music is live on the stage, the same way his visuals were live. He was like created this kind of a game he went through with his like a PlayStation controller, and it was the visuals. That's one example. Then it means I'm not alone, actually.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel, I mean, I know you said you're getting a second person on stage with you, but did you feel lonely on stage ever?
Yes, of course. That's why I get a drummer. You really need because he adds this kind of emotion that is very hard to get from samplers and synthesizers. If the show is not, if you don't really hit the vibe of the place and of the people, then being alone is very hard. But if you have someone with you, you can just jam together. You know, it's not that bad. You know.
How often do you perform for the public? Let's say in a typical month, how many concerts would you give?
Could be a lot. because I'm part of many projects. So in a typical month, which is something like October, which is like a club season, it could be 2 concerts every week, Friday, Saturday. But
and where do you play? It's just musical clubs or even bigger venues like stadiums?
No, I don't think I played the stadium, but it depends. I mean, I played with bands that play like second biggest stages on big festivals like Colors of Ostrava, but I also play like very small venues like Café v lese.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in between.
When you were young and coming up in the scene, what were the clubs in Prague or just across the country that were really vital for you to go out and see performances of other DJs, producers, musicians who are doing the same kind of thing as you do that really got you inspired?
Well, I do have to mention the promoting activities of Lunch Meet Collective. It was in several venues, but most usually in Studio Hrdinu in National Gallery. And that's like my cup of coffee or my blood type. And that's where I get most inspired. It's like the festival, and then they have like several smaller shows during the year. But every time I went to the festival, I felt like I was in some sort of school. This was very inspiring, and like the biggest names in what I liked back then were there.
What were the names which inspired you most when you were growing up as an artist?
Well, I was lucky to meet Sophie when she was alive.
Wow.
Because of Lunch Me, because they invited her like many times. I did meet her and I did talk to her, and so that was a conversation. And Czech musicians that I like, and it's interesting for me because all the musicians I liked when I was a kid or when I was like a teenager, I get to meet now because of my job, and many of my collaborators like Lenka Dusilová, Katarzia, Floex, and this kind of people I usually meet now. And some of them I call my friends, and that's very rewarding.
And are there any venues in Prague? I know you mentioned a couple places. I'm thinking of Collector, that cafe right underneath Veletržní Palác. They're always spotlighting DJs who maybe are up and coming a little bit. But are there any other places that you see as important venues for young talent to get their chance to perform in the genre that you're working in?
Today, the most busy and important club is Fox 2 and Bike Jesus, and I think they do invite like young people to join the stage. I think if you're a young producer or DJ, you can just write them and they might find a spot. But what's didn't really change is Café v lese. I mean, it was there when I started, and we did parties there. It is small. But it's not like too small. So you can have a famous band here, and you can have a upcoming act play there, one of their first shows, and it looks still good.
Is it important for you to spot and help young emerging talents? You're still very young, but do you sometimes feel that you are something like a mentor for younger musicians?
They are super into it, and you can see that they want the information, and they this kind of energy really gives me something back. And if the music thing goes down south, I would definitely focus on education. There is kind of a difference between me and the current young generation, because 10 years ago it was still kind of fresh to just make music on your computer in your room, but now it's a very usual thing, and everybody does that. So the competition is strong, and I think the young generation really have to try much harder than I did.
And what you said about, it's a little bit more accessible in terms of people have a bit more access to produce this kind of music. So in some ways, do you think it's made it harder for young talent to stand out because it's a little bit easier? I mean, I don't have to be a professional violin player necessarily. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's harder, but the accessibility of the stuff you need to make music is sort of the same for like last 10, 15 years. But what's harder is that you need much more social media presence and marketing, and you really need to be not just a musician, but also somehow funny on the internet or just creative in a visual way. So I think to make it as a musician, you have to put together more talents than just music. And it might have been like this even before, but now it's like more striking, I would say.
Does that come easy to you, kind of promoting yourself and doing self-promotion, or is that something that is maybe a little more difficult?
No, I hate it. And I even didn't use Instagram for like a year now, but then I met with the social media manager of Lunchmeet, and she was like, well, are you kidding? It's like you're totally against yourself. Yeah, I wish I wouldn't have to do it, but I'm trying to find something interesting in it, like you're kind of editing videos, which is also creative stuff. So
you are very strong in electronic music, obviously. How do you think the perception of electronic music as a genre changed since you joined the business?
I think what changed in a way is that it was definitely starting 10 years ago, but now the most visible and most successful music is rap and hip-hop. And there's so much of electronic music, and it's basically just electronic music with vocals. So it might be the most usual kind of music, actually.
And do you think there's any misconceptions about the genre? Because maybe at one point it was never abnormal or anything, but there might have been an impression that it was, electronic music. Maybe you think you go to Berlin and clubs like Berghain, and it's a little bit unique or niche in that way. So do you think there's been any misconceptions about the genre in general?
I think people don't really realize, and I found out when we were talking together on the phone, that you can't really record music today without a computer. So in a way, all music is electronic music. And there's, I think the difference is kind of blur now, because in electronic music you're using acoustic stuff as well. I think with the accessibility of the stuff you need to produce music, more people get to know that it isn't easy. Because like 10 years ago, the idea was that you just press spacebar and the music somehow happens. But now, like, everybody kind of tried it. Everybody has a GarageBand in their phone and stuff. And so they get a glimpse of what it is to create music and to create the good music. And so I think the misconceptions are fading away, because everybody's sometimes tried it, or everybody's seen somebody do it, and the process is getting more and more visible. It might be as hard as playing a real instrument, or sometimes maybe harder.
This is Faces of Czech Music with 8-Kit. Our listeners may know your concert with selected jazz musicians from the Czech Radio Orchestra. Did you enjoy that concert?
I did. It was hard because it was a new project, new people that never met together, and it was a first show. First shows are always super difficult.
But you had rehearsals before.
We did, but still, you can't really rehearse everything.
Of course, there is a lot of improvisation, I assume. When I watched the concert, I noticed that other musicians were sort of lively and dynamic, and you were concentrated on something you had in front of you. Did you really interact with other band members?
I did. I'm lucky this wasn't my first jazz concert with improvisation, because I had a few concerts with Tomáš Sikora, with the jazz composer, before, so I know how improvisation in a jazz band work. And I did interact in a very literal way, because I had the outputs from the other instruments in my mixer, and I manipulate them live. So I was interacting with the exact sounds that was played on the stage, but not always. Sometimes I just did play with them.
This for a person who is not technically well equipped and experienced like me sounds difficult to understand. There was a drummer or a bass player on the stage doing some sounds. The sounds went into your equipment and you manipulated with them, and that's what the audience heard.
It was one of the things that the audience heard. I mean, I don't really mess with drums and bass because they really need to stay.
It was just an example.
Stay solid.
Yeah.
But the brass section, it goes to the mixing desk, and from the mixing desk, the same way you get monitors for playing, I get the output, but I don't plug it into a monitor speaker. I plug it into my sampler, and I record it, and then I play it back using different instruments, or I add some effects to it.
I see.
There's it's too technical.
People might think jazz and electronic music have nothing in common or might not be complementary genres, but where do you see the links between the two and how they might actually be a nice match?
Well, it's a usual match in everywhere in the world, so it's nothing new. But my experience is super positive, because I think jazz from its definition is looking for something new and looking for ways to experiment, and that's where the electronic music stuff comes very handy, because you can manipulate sound to very different sounds, and every jazz player I met with and I played with or I recorded with was super interested in it. So it's a perfect match. I'm actually playing my best shows now when I'm playing with the jazz musicians. I really feel like I'm playing. I love it.
Do you see that as a new way to maybe bridge audiences too? Because objectively, not to generalize, but maybe folks who are listening to, electronic music and folks who are listening to jazz could be different groups. But do you see that as a chance to maybe bring the two together across generation lines, maybe?
Yeah, could be. I think every time when this kind of stuff blends, it doesn't have to be jazz and electronic music. It could be different genres together. It always helps, and I mean that's what happened to me with the Radiohead album. I mean, I was a fan of guitar music, and these bleep loops and stuff was I hated it, and then my favorite band started experimenting with it, and I was I first felt kind of betrayed, and then I realized it really works. So it could happen to anyone.
Let me ask a simple question, just to make myself more comfortable. I know you played guitar when you were young. Do you still play it?
Yeah, I do.
And do you like the instrument?
Yeah, I'm not like a live player. I'm not very good at it, but it helps me compose a lot.
Speaking about different things and genres. You also composed a soundtrack for the movie Arvéd. That's all done with a computer, or did you use some instruments like your guitar, for example?
Well, as I said, every music now gets done with the computer because you needed to record it. There is lots of we did on a computer, but I did it with my colleague, Jonathan Pasterčák, aka Piony. And our concept for the movie was to record a lot of instruments, but work with them in this like electronic music mindset, or to look for sounds in the live instruments. For example, violoncello, like that's perfect instrument for such work, and try to find sounds on the violoncello that doesn't sound like violoncello. So it's what we learned from working with computers. Like you can manipulate everything with everything, and we try to use that experience on real instruments and real players. It was so much fun.
Everybody says these days that the artificial intelligence will replace us. Are you afraid any time that the AI would replace you as a composer?
I'm not afraid. I mean, it might happen. It will happen in a way, because like commercial stuff will definitely get done with AI. But I think, for example, directors of movies will always need another human soul to think about the movie and to try to add some new meanings with the music. And that, I believe, is still and for a long time will be very hard to reproduce with AI, like the conversation. For example, Arvéd is like 4 years thinking about one story and thinking what we can do with it. For this reason, I'm not that afraid.
And going off that, I'm curious about your creative process, because I guess when you think about musicians, you know, starting to think of ideas, you think about them going into the studio and, you know, jamming it out together, but you're mostly by yourself. So would you take us through how you go from getting an idea to putting it onto the computer to getting it out to the speakers?
Depends. If I'm working for something like for a movie or for a theater, then it's more like I need something. It's in my head, and then I do my best to take the idea I have in my head into real life. But when I'm free, I just want to make music, then it's very much improvisation. I just plug some stuff together, like synthesizers into effects, into samplers, and then I just hit record, and I record like 30, 40 or an hour of music, and then I look through the pieces, and when there's something good, then I take it and try to work on it some more.
When you are looking for the raw material, which you then turn into music, what are you looking for? What are your favorite sounds? Human speech, industrial sounds, wind, rain. Is that useful for you?
Yes, everything's useful. I still like to work with instruments. I really like old synthesizers, like 70s, 80s. This like old, warm sound. It's still like if you have the right synthesizer, you just play 2 notes and it's done. It's perfect already. So I tend to use these a lot. And then whatever. I mean, I work a lot with string instruments, like with recordings of string instruments, because that's a very nice timbre. Or samples of other people's work. Like, for example, I turn on the radio and I sample from the radio. Like, I take some sounds. I don't know what song is it, and then I mangle it in a way I don't think, and I hope nobody will recognize what the song was. But that's also a great source of inspiration.
Interesting. And do you have one reliable source of inspiration, a person, or I know you mentioned Radiohead as kind of a foundational band for you, but is there anything else or anyone else?
It's good that you said a person, because I'm lucky to I have found many great collaborators. As I was talking before about Jonathan, the composer who did Arvéd with me, that's always we kind of move like a different ways. But when we meet, it's always like a fresh air of inspiration, and that's just one of the people. And then all the people from jazz I work with now, Tomáš Sikora and for example, these people with like musical, like really musical background, like the real composers. I'm just, doing stuff out of coincidence. But these guys who like really know how to lay notes on the paper the right way. Or I have a friend, Igor Bruso, who is also kind of active on the Czech scene, and we just jam together a lot. And I have hours of material of us just jamming, and I have stored it, and I did some sorting of all the stuff that we recorded. And when I don't know what to do, I just look into it and always find something interesting.
We've been talking about work all the time. Before we finish, I would like to ask whether you relax at all, and if yes, how do you relax?
Well, it's I can't say I was talking about work all the time, because it's also, I mean, I do get paid for it, but it's not work all the time. I would do it anyway. When I compose for something, yes, it's work, and when I relax, it's the jamming that's like my favorite getaway. And sometimes it just merges together, and you don't know what's what. But that's what's so great about this job.
Well, you've been listening to the Faces of Czech Music with our guest today, Aid Kid. Thank you so much for speaking with us and coming by today. We wish you all the best.
Thanks for inviting me.
Faces of Czech Music is a Radio Prague International and Czech Center's podcast.
Presented by Petr Dudek
and Amelia Mola-Schmidt.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Today's program featured music from Aid Kid's 2023 performance with the Český rozhlas Big Band at the open-air festival Mladí Ladi Jazz. Also music from his 2019 album Cinematographer's Journal and his 2018 album titled Aid Kid.